Imagine you're on a boat, somewhere in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's summer. The water is that specific shade of blue that doesn't look real. And ahead of you, rising out of the sea, is an island, Europe's second largest island, surrounded by France, Italy, and North Africa, sitting at the absolute heart of the civilized world. You'd assume this island is one of the most developed, most populated, most visited places in Europe. You'd assume it's covered in cities, crossed by highways, and bursting with the kind of density you'd expect from somewhere this strategically, historically, geographically important. But when you step off that boat and walk inland, past the coastline, past the resort hotels, past the last village with a traffic light, something strange happens. The people disappear. Sardinia, despite being the size of Slovenia, has an interior that is almost completely empty. Ghost villages where the cemetery has more residents than the houses. Ancient stone towers built by a civilization so forgotten that nobody today knows their name. And mountain communities so isolated from the outside world that they developed their own unwritten legal code, and one of the most bizarre medical mysteries on the entire planet. So why does almost nobody live on Europe's most fascinating Mediterranean island?
It's in these moments of solitude that we find clarity. The world rushes by down there, but up here, time stands still.
The first clue to Sardinia's emptiness isn't in the history books or the economics data. It's written directly into the landscape itself. When most people think of Sardinia, they think of the Costa Smeralda. That narrow strip of impossible coastline in the north where superyachts anchor and the water is a color that looks digitally altered. And that image isn't wrong. The coastline is extraordinary, but Sardinia is not its coastline. Step 20 kilometers inland, and you enter a completely different world. The island's interior is dominated by the Gennargentu Massif, a brutal, ancient mountain range whose name in Sardinian means Silver Gate, named for the snow that covers its peaks in winter. The highest point, Punta la Marmora, rises to 1,834 meters. These aren't gentle rolling hills. They're sharp ridges, deep gorges, and valleys so narrow and steep that for most of human history, they were effectively impassable. This terrain creates a psychological barrier almost as powerful as a physical one. Even today, a journey that would take 40 minutes on a German highway can take 2 to 3 hours on Sardinia's winding mountain roads, if those roads exist at all. But mountains alone don't explain emptiness. Switzerland has mountains, and it's full of people. What makes Sardinia different is what happened there across thousands of years of history, and what that history did to the people who stayed. Because Sardinia's interior doesn't just have mountains. It has mountains that are hiding something extraordinary. Scattered across this rugged landscape are approximately 7,000 nuraghi, ancient circular stone towers built between 1,800 and 900 BC. Sardinia has more prehistoric stone monuments per square kilometer than almost anywhere on Earth. Entire civilizations rose and fell here before Rome was even a village. And then, like the towers themselves, the people who built them seemed to almost vanish, retreating deeper and deeper into the mountains as wave after wave of foreign invaders arrived on the coasts. That retreat is the key to understanding everything about Sardinia today. The story of Sardinia's population is essentially the story of people being pushed inward and never coming back out. The Phoenicians arrived first, around 900 BC, building trading posts along the southern and western coasts. Then the Carthaginians, then the Romans. Each civilization followed the same pattern. They wanted the harbors, the flat coastal plains, the agricultural lowlands. They built their cities near the sea and left the mountains alone. For Rome, Sardinia was an important but deeply unpleasant posting. The coastal plains and the marshy lowlands were riddled with malaria. Roman writers described it as punishment. Even the island's most productive agricultural region, the Campidano Plain in the south, came with a deadly seasonal price. The annual fever that killed or incapacitated thousands of people every year. And so a pattern emerged that would define Sardinia for the next 2,000 years. The coast meant trade, but also invaders and disease. The mountains meant poverty, but they also meant safety. The people who retreated deepest into the mountains, into the region known as Barbagia, a name the Romans gave it, meaning roughly land of the barbarians, were the ones who survived every single conquest that came after. The Vandals came, then the Byzantines, then various Italian city-states fought over the harbors. Then, for 400 years, the Spanish crown of Aragon ruled the island. Through all of it, the Barbagia remained essentially unconquered, not because nobody tried, but because the mountains simply would not let them in. The Romans tried to pacify Barbagia. They failed. The Spanish tried. They also failed. Even Mussolini, in the 20th century, sent special carabinieri units into the mountain villages to impose order. He largely failed too, because the people of the Barbagia hadn't just retreated physically into the mountains. They had built an entire alternative civilization inside them, one that didn't need, and didn't want, anything from the outside world. To understand why the interior of Sardinia is empty today, you have to understand what it felt like to live there for 2,000 years. The Barbagia developed something called the Codice Barbaricino, the Barbarian Code. Not a written law, not a government decree, an unwritten social contract that governed every aspect of mountain life, passed down through generations by example and expectation. Its core principle was simple. The state does not exist here. We govern ourselves. Justice wasn't delivered by a judge appointed in Rome or Madrid or Turin. It was delivered by the community, through a complex, sometimes brutal system of personal honor and vendetta. Wrongs were answered by the family of the wronged party. The concept of going to the authorities wasn't just unusual. It was considered deeply shameful. A man who reported a crime to the police was seen as weak. A man who settled his own disputes was respected. This created a culture of extraordinary self-reliance, fierce local loyalty, and complete distrust of outsiders, especially government outsiders. A culture where every stranger was a potential threat, and the only people you trusted were the people you'd known since birth. And then the story takes one of its strangest turns. The same isolation that made Barbagia a place of bandits and vendettas also made it one of the healthiest places on Earth. Sardinia, specifically the Barbagia and Ogliastra regions deep in the interior, is one of only 5 places in the world classified as a blue zone, a place where people live measurably, scientifically longer than almost anywhere else. Sardinia has the highest concentration of male centenarians on the planet, and researchers believe the reasons are directly connected to the same factors that kept the island empty. The diet, simple, local, built from what the mountains provided. The social structure, tight communities where elderly people are never isolated or forgotten. The daily physical demands. People here continue walking steep terrain and contributing to village life into their 90s. And perhaps most strangely, the genetic isolation itself. Centuries of marrying within small mountain communities created a unique genetic profile that scientists are still studying today. The emptiness that looks like poverty from the outside is, in some ways, the secret to an extraordinarily long life. But in the modern world, it's also become a trap. Here is the paradox Sardinia faces today. The same cultural DNA that kept these mountain communities alive for 2,000 years is now accelerating their disappearance. Young people from the Barbagia grow up in villages of 200, 300, sometimes fewer people. There are no universities in the mountains. There are often no jobs beyond agriculture and small-scale herding. The nearest major city, Cagliari, can be a 2 or 3 hour drive away on a good day. So they leave, and they don't come back. Sardinia as a whole has been losing population for decades. The island has around 1.6 million people today, but that number falls every year. In the interior villages, the decline is alarming. Some places have more people in the cemetery than in the houses. Entire streets of beautiful stone buildings, standing empty, slowly returning to the landscape. The Italian government has tried various interventions. In some of the most dramatic cases, villages began offering free houses, literally giving away properties to anyone willing to move in, renovate, and commit to staying. Some offered cash payments of 15,000–20,000 euros to families willing to relocate. These schemes get enormous international media attention. Articles go viral showing beautiful stone homes for €1 in some forgotten Sardinian mountain village. Hundreds of inquiries flood in from Germany, the Netherlands, America. Almost none of them result in permanent residence, because the problem was never the houses. It's everything that isn't there: the schools, the hospitals, the broadband internet, the jobs, the social infrastructure that makes modern life possible. You can own a beautiful stone house for free in a Sardinian mountain village, but you'll have to drive 2 hours to see a specialist doctor. Your children will board a bus at 6 a.m. for school. And there is a very real chance that your new neighbors, descendants of people who kept the same strangers out for 2,000 years, will always see you as an outsider. The Sardinian language, Sardu, is not a dialect of Italian. Linguists classify it as the oldest surviving Romance language, closer to ancient Latin than anything spoken on Earth today. The fact that it survived Roman rule, Spanish rule, and Italian unification is itself a testament to how completely these communities resisted assimilation. And now that resistance, which was once a superpower, has become the island's most complicated inheritance. So, why does almost nobody live on Europe's most fascinating Mediterranean island? Because the geography made the interior a fortress. Because history taught the people inside that fortress that every outsider was an invader. Because that lesson became a culture so resilient, it survived 2,000 years of empires, and so resistant to change that it's now struggling to survive the 21st century. Sardinia's empty interior isn't a failure. It's the scar tissue of a civilization that refused to be conquered. The villages are emptying now, not because an army came, but because an airport did. Because young Sardinians discovered that the world outside the mountain gate was larger, louder, and full of possibilities the Gennargentu couldn't offer. Whether that interior ever fills again, whether free houses and cash incentives can reverse a demographic tide 2,000 years in the making, is one of the most fascinating geographic questions in Europe right now. And the answer, like everything about this island, will be decided by the mountains. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we'll see you next time.